At 1:29 in the afternoon, an unmanned aerial vehicle launched from Iran's southern coastline and set a direct course toward a nuclear-powered American aircraft carrier carrying nearly 6,000 personnel. The Iranian operators guiding the aircraft believed they were conducting a routine intelligence-gathering mission, expecting nothing more than another reel of propaganda footage to be broadcast on state media. What they did not know was that an F-35C stealth fighter had already been quietly maneuvering into an intercept position from above and behind, approaching without radar emissions, without radio transmissions, and without activating a single sensor that could betray its presence. The stealth aircraft had been conducting combat patrol roughly 30 miles to the east when it was vectored toward the contact by the carrier strike group, and its pilot kept the approach entirely passive, relying on a capability the Iranian drone had no means of detecting or countering. The effectiveness of that capability depended entirely on the Iranians never knowing the fighter was there. Built into the F-35's airframe are 6 infrared cameras distributed across its surface, stitching together a continuous, seamless 360-degree thermal image that is projected directly into the pilot's helmet display. Because these cameras detect heat signatures passively rather than emitting any signal of their own, the aircraft can observe its surroundings the way a surveillance camera captures movement in darkness, without switching on a light or announcing its presence in any way. To the Revolutionary Guard operators monitoring the satellite feedback on Iranian soil, their screens showed an entirely ordinary surveillance flight, open water, calm conditions, and the carrier formation slowly filling the frame. They had no indication that a stealth fighter had quietly positioned itself behind their drone and was now methodically cataloging everything the drone transmitted. Every radio frequency used by the drone's satellite uplink, every command protocol issued by its ground controllers, every electronic emission produced by its onboard sensor package was being passively recorded. The satellite communications data alone represented a significant intelligence windfall because once the frequency, modulation pattern, and encryption handshake of a data link architecture are known, every platform in a fleet using that same architecture becomes trackable. Iran had dispatched a drone to gather intelligence on the carrier. The carrier had, without Iran's knowledge, used that drone as an intelligence source of its own. By approximately 1:34 in the afternoon, the stealth fighter had closed to a distance at which its electro-optical targeting system, a high-resolution camera array housed beneath the nose of the aircraft, could resolve the drone in sufficient detail for a positive identification. A Hawkeye airborne early warning aircraft orbiting at 25,000 feet had been tracking the contact from 50 miles out, but lacked the resolution to assess what was mounted on the drone's hardpoints. The close-up reconnaissance now provided confirmation of the aircraft type, but left the weapons question unresolved. The report transmitted back to the carrier indicated that hardpoint configuration remained ambiguous, with possible missile rails visible but no confirmed weapons load. That answer complicated the decision facing the strike group commander considerably. Unlike the expendable loitering munitions Iran had deployed in other theaters, the aircraft in question was a full-size reconnaissance platform with a range exceeding 2,000 kilometers, capable of carrying guided munitions, sensor packages, or camera systems across its hardpoints. A confirmed weapons load would have reduced the decision to a straightforward calculation. A confirmed empty airframe would have permitted continued surveillance collection without escalation. What the pilot was describing fell into the space between those two outcomes, and the drone was advancing more than 40 meters closer to nearly 6,000 American service members with every second of deliberation. Simultaneously, the track data from the Hawkeye had been pushed through the strike group's cooperative engagement network, a system that links every ship and aircraft in a formation into a single unified tactical picture so that any sensor contact can be engaged by any weapon system in the group. 3 guided missile destroyers in the carrier's escort formation had already computed firing solutions on the drone automatically. These vessels are designed to intercept ballistic missiles traveling at many times the speed of sound. Applying their capabilities to a propeller-driven reconnaissance drone moving at highway speeds was a disproportionate application of firepower by any measure, but the fire control systems do not weigh proportionality. They solve targeting equations and wait for authorization. The decision itself was not a simple one. Iranian aircraft have every legal right to operate in international airspace, and nuclear negotiations between the relevant parties were scheduled to begin in 3 days. Shooting down a surveillance drone on the eve of those talks would have handed Tehran a ready-made grievance, a propaganda opportunity, and a principled-sounding justification for walking away from the negotiating table. Allowing the drone to continue its approach meant Iranian cameras were building increasingly detailed imagery of the carrier's flight deck, aircraft positioning, and defensive configurations with each kilometer they closed, the kind of material used to construct strike packages. The historical precedent was not reassuring. Several years prior, a similar Iranian drone had conducted a close overflight of another American carrier in the same region, and the Navy had permitted it to proceed without intervention. Iranian state media broadcast the resulting footage repeatedly for months, framing it as evidence that they could surveil American naval assets at will. The reputational and intelligence damage from that decision had reverberated through military planning circles for years. The strike group commander understood clearly that a similar outcome was not acceptable. At the same time, every additional minute the stealth fighter spent shadowing the drone produced more intelligence value. The electronic fingerprint being assembled during those minutes represented months of potential analytical work for the intelligence community, enabling identification and tracking of every platform in the Iranian inventory using the same data link architecture. Terminating the collection too early meant leaving that information incomplete. But every minute of additional collection also meant allowing the drone to close further on a carrier and its crew. After approximately 5 minutes of passive surveillance collection, a period judged sufficient to produce a comprehensive electronic profile of the drone's communications architecture, the commander made his decision. The authorization transmitted down the chain of command in 2 words. The pilot of the stealth fighter did not need to maneuver aggressively or activate a targeting radar. The imaging infrared seeker of the air-to-air missile had been tracking the drone's heat signature continuously for several minutes. The engine exhaust, the warm trailing surfaces, the thermal contrast of the propeller disc against cold ocean air all providing a clean and stable lock. The missile left the rail at close to 3 times the speed of sound. A seeker designed to track maneuvering fighter aircraft pulling high G turns and discriminate them from decoy flares found a drone flying a straight and level course with no countermeasures, no electronic jamming capability, and no capacity to evade. The result was not in question from the moment of launch. In Iran, the satellite feed cut to static mid-frame. One moment the carrier was growing in the frame, and the next the operators were looking at nothing. Iranian state media would later report that contact had been lost during a routine surveillance mission, omitting any reference to the missile that ended it or the 5 minutes of intelligence the drone had unknowingly donated to the adversary it had been sent to observe. As American analysts began working through the captured satellite uplink data, they found something that the Revolutionary Guard had never intended to transmit. Embedded within the drone's command protocols were coordination timestamps synchronized to the minute with a separate operation already underway 500 miles away. Iran had not sent a drone simply to gather imagery of the carrier. It had sent the drone to absorb the carrier's attention while something else happened elsewhere. And the stealth fighter had just recovered the evidence. 9 minutes after the missile impact, 6 fast attack craft appeared on radar inbound from the Iranian coast at 40 knots. Converging on a commercial tanker that had entered the Strait of Hormuz and was proceeding at 15 knots toward open water. At the rate they were closing, the Iranian boats needed less than 15 minutes to reach the tanker. The vessel had perhaps 24 minutes before it cleared the most dangerous stretch of the strait. The geometry was not favorable. Bridge watch confirmation removed any remaining ambiguity about the intent of the approaching craft. 6 low-profile fiberglass-hulled vessels in a coordinated formation. Bow-mounted heavy machine guns with ammunition loaded and boarding equipment staged visibly on deck. Grappling hooks, ladders, and armed personnel in tactical gear. With a surveillance drone circling overhead at 5,000 feet and streaming the operation. In real time to a command center that apparently expected to have the situation resolved within 15 minutes. The lead boat crossed the tanker's bow at a distance of roughly 300 meters. A second ran down the port side, close enough that the tanker's crew could make out the gun team positioned behind the mounted weapon. The remaining 4 vessels formed a rotating perimeter around the tanker, cutting off every viable heading. Then came the radio call, accented English, no preamble, instructing the tanker to stop engines immediately and prepare to receive a boarding party. This approach had been used before and had worked. The same shipping company had lost a vessel to exactly this tactic years earlier, with the crew held for more than 2 months, while diplomatic efforts moved slowly and the international community issued statements that produced no immediate results. Other vessels had been seized through the same formula in the same waters. The method relied on speed, surprise, and the assumption that the operation would be complete before any meaningful military response could arrive. The tanker captain responded as merchant captains operating in piracy risk environments are trained to respond. He pushed to maximum engine power and activated the ship's defensive measures. High-pressure fire hoses directed over the sides created barriers of water that made any approach to the hull difficult, and the helmsman began throwing the rudder through hard alternating turns, generating a churning and unpredictable wake that made it extremely difficult for a small boat crew to maintain position long enough to deploy a grappling hook or boarding ladder. The captain simultaneously broadcast a distress call on the International Maritime Emergency Frequency, identifying the vessel, the location, and the nature of the threat. At 15 knots against boats capable of 50, running was not a realistic escape strategy. It was a way to keep the situation dynamic and complicated while hoping that the distress call reached someone positioned to respond in time. The Iranian crews tightened the formation as the tanker maneuvered. A grappling hook thrown toward the deck rail bounced off the hull and fell into the wake. A boat attempting to come alongside the port quarter took a direct hit from one of the pressurized hoses and broke off, circled, and came back. These were experienced crews who had conducted this type of operation before and understood that fire hoses were a nuisance rather than a deterrent. But every failed approach bought additional minutes. The Revolutionary Guard's operational timing had been calculated with the assumption that the carrier strike group would be occupied with the drone contact and that no other American naval asset would be within effective range of the strait in time to intervene. What that assumption missed was a doctrinal change the Navy had implemented specifically in response to a prior tanker seizure in these same waters. Following that incident, the service had begun rotating guided missile destroyers independently through the strait on patterns specifically designed to ensure a warship rather than a diplomatic communique would be the first American response to any future boarding attempt. The USS McFall had been shadowing commercial traffic through the region for weeks when it went to maximum speed from a position 12 nautical miles to the southeast. At that distance and speed, it was approximately 20 minutes from the tanker, and it had been within effective gun range of the Iranian boats for considerably longer than that. The reason it had not already engaged was the same reason the drone decision had required deliberation. Turning 6 Iranian fast attack craft into wreckage in the strait would have given Tehran the confrontation it wanted, a pretext for closing the waterway and causing an immediate global energy crisis. The more strategically effective outcome was for the boats to choose to leave on their own. Achieving that outcome required them to be presented with a situation that made continuation obviously untenable. At 1:45 in the afternoon, a voice transmission on the International Maritime Emergency Frequency, the same channel the tanker's distress call had gone out on, the frequency that every vessel in the area monitors continuously, announced in American English that the Iranian vessels were conducting hostile action against the vessel under United States Navy escort and directed them to break off immediately and return to port. For the tanker's bridge crew, that transmission confirmed that help was close enough to matter. For the Iranian boat commanders, it posed a question about whether the transmission reflected a genuine nearby presence or was a bluff from a distant asset trying to buy time. 1 minute later, the McFall came over the horizon. Nearly 9,000 tons of guided missile destroyer at flank speed, bow wave throwing white water across the surface, with the barrel of its 5-inch naval gun visibly oriented toward the Iranian formation. Overhead, strike aircraft out of a base in Qatar had arrived on station and were now stacking contrails at 20,000 feet, with targeting systems already locked onto the boats below. The Iranian commanders were now looking at the physical evidence that the operational premise of their mission had been incorrect. Distracting one aircraft carrier had not left the strait unguarded. The boarding attempts stopped. The boats kept circling, held in place by whatever combination of uncertainty and unwillingness to appear to flee, kept them from breaking off immediately. The chain guns on the destroyer tracked the nearest hull with the patient mechanical consistency of automated weapon systems that operate independently of hesitation or fatigue. A second radio transmission from the warship repeated the order to break off. At 1:49 in the afternoon, the lead Iranian vessel opened throttle and headed for the Iranian coast. 3 others followed within seconds. The remaining 2 peeled off moments later. The formation that had seemed formidable 11 minutes earlier dissolved into 6 separate wakes, all pointed toward home. The surveillance drone that had been circling overhead dutifully recorded the retreat for a command center that had prepared for a very different ending. The destroyer escorted the tanker through the remainder of the strait without further incident. Crew unharmed, cargo undisturbed, and the waterway through which a significant portion of the world's daily oil supply passes continuing to function as if the entire operation had never been attempted.